Widely known that this cartel is in partnership with Scotland's Lions Gang, making vast profits from killing Scots.
Horror reigns on the streets of Glasgow, a city torn apart by the brutal rule of its biggest drug families. With 3 drug-related hits every day, the toll of addiction and violence is staggering. From the savage attacks of rival gangs to the relentless pursuit of justice by law enforcement, Glasgow's underworld is a battleground. But in the middle of the chaos, one question looms large. Can Glasgow ever break free from the grip of its deadliest foes? Or is it doomed to be consumed by the darkness that lurks within? In the early 2000s, Glasgow became a breeding ground for criminal activity, with 2 notorious gangs at the forefront, the Daniels clan and the Lions Gang. The catalyst for their bitter feud can be traced back to a daring theft that shook the foundations of the Scottish underworld. It was a daring heist orchestrated by the Lions Gang that set the stage for years of bloodshed. In 2001, they brazenly stole a substantial stash of coke from the Daniels clan, a move that ignited simmering tensions between the 2 factions. You see, the theft wasn't merely about drugs, it was a power play, a declaration of war over control of Glasgow's lucrative drug trade. As the conflict escalated, the city transformed into a battleground, with violence erupting on its streets.
People getting shot in the street.
Once known for its vibrant culture, Glasgow now bore witness to brutal turf wars and retaliatory attacks. One of the most infamous events during this period occurred in December 2006, forever etching its place in Glasgow's dark history. 2 hitmen, believed to be from the Daniels clan, launched a daring assault on a garage owned by the brother of the Lions Gang's leader. Armed with handguns and clad in ominous black coats, they struck swiftly, leaving a trail of bloodshed in their wake. When the smoke cleared, 3 victims lay on the ground, casualties of the ruthless power struggle. Among them was Stephen Lyons, a key figure in the Lions Gang. The attack, orchestrated with precision, sent shockwaves throughout the city, marking a pivotal moment in the escalating conflict. But the violence didn't stop there. In the ensuing chaos, the Daniels clan suffered a devastating blow with the death of Kevin Carroll, a notorious figure within the gang. Carroll, known by the ominous nickname Gerbil, was a long-standing enemy of the Lions Gang, his vendetta fueled by years of animosity. In 2006, as Carroll sat unsuspecting in a car parked outside a supermarket, masked killers descended upon him, unleashing a hail of gunfire. Trapped inside the vehicle, Carroll had no chance of escape, meeting his demise in a hail of bullets. The murders of Stephen Lyons and Kevin Carroll were just 2 in a series of brutal acts that defined Glasgow's descent into chaos. With each life lost, the feud between the Daniels clan and the Lions Gang grew more volatile, plunging the city into a state of perpetual fear, which brings us to the connections and alliances of the gang. As the conflict between the Lions Gang and the Daniels clan raged on, a new player entered the deadly game, shifting the balance of power in Glasgow's criminal underworld. The Lions Gang, seeking to bolster their resources and expand their reach, allied with none other than the infamous Kinahan cartel from Ireland. The roots of this unholy alliance can be traced back to the early 2000s. Drawn together by a shared appetite for power and profit, the 2 criminal organisations formed a pact that would have far-reaching consequences for Glasgow and beyond. The Kinahan cartel, notorious for its ruthless tactics and iron grip on Ireland's drug trade, provided the Lions Gang with access to a steady supply of high-quality drugs, including coke and heroin. This influx of illicit substances fueled the Lions Gang's ascent, empowering them to strengthen their grip on Glasgow's streets. But the alliance wasn't merely about drugs. It was a strategic move to consolidate power and control. With the backing of the Kinahan cartel, the Lions Gang became a formidable force, striking fear into the hearts of their rivals and solidifying their position as the dominant players in Glasgow's criminal underworld. The shift in power dynamics became starkly evident following the death of Jamie Daniel in 2016. As the head of the Daniels clan, Jamie's demise left a power vacuum that the Lions Gang wasted no time exploiting. With their newfound strength and resources, they launched a relentless campaign of violence against their enemies. Key figures within the Daniels clan, such as Robert Daniel and Monaghan, bore the brunt of the Lions Gang's fury. Targeted attacks on Robert Daniel and Monaghan served as chilling reminders of the Lions Gang's newfound dominance. Whether it was in the form of assassination attempts or brazen assaults, the violence escaped to unprecedented levels. For the Lions Gang, their alliance with the Kinahan cartel proved to be a game-changer, propelling them to new heights of power and influence. But with the use of power comes consequences, and major retaliation came their way. The years following 2016 saw the feud between the Lions Gang and the Daniels clan reach new heights of brutality, with Glasgow becoming a battleground soaked in blood and vengeance. Fueled by a thirst for revenge, the Lions Gang launched a coordinated vendetta against their rivals, sparing no expense in their quest for domination. Assassination attempts became commonplace as the Lions sought to eliminate anyone associated with the Daniels clan. Following this aggressive stance by their rivals, the Daniels clan fought back by blazing gunshots at the Lions' headquarters and even ended up assassinating a few members of the gang. Although their names never surfaced as to who got shot and died, it has been reported that the Lions Gang faced huge losses. But perhaps the most savage act of retaliation came in the form of an attack on Stephen Bozo Daniel, another leader of the Daniels clan. In a chilling display of brutality, Bozo's car was pursued in a high-speed chase before being cornered on a freeway exit. What followed was a bloodbath of unprecedented ferocity, as members of the Lions Gang unleashed a barrage of violence upon their helpless victim. With bladed weapons in their hand, they stabbed Bozo multiple times, leaving him disfigured. The attack on Bozo served as a grim reminder of the escalating violence that had consumed Glasgow's streets. As the feud reached new heights, law enforcement agencies refused to stand idly by. Operation Engagement, a police crackdown aimed at quelling the violence, was launched against the warring factions. Armed with unprecedented resources and determination, law enforcement officers descended upon Glasgow's criminal underworld, determined to bring an end to the reign of terror. But the battle against organised crime would prove to be no easy task. Despite the efforts of law enforcement, the feud raged on, with new deaths and atrocities continuing to stain the streets of Glasgow. As the violence in Glasgow reached a fever pitch, law enforcement agencies launched a relentless crackdown on criminal networks operating within the city's shadows. Armed with cutting-edge technology, they targeted encrypted communication channels used by the gangs to coordinate their nefarious activities. However, they did not know that the reach of Glasgow's criminal underworld extended far beyond its borders, with connections to notorious organisations like the Kinahan cartel in Ireland. One such connection was through figures like Robert Kelby, whose ties to the Kinahan cartel ran deep. Kelby, a prominent figure in Glasgow's criminal landscape, found himself at the centre of a web of intrigue, with connections to both the Kinahan cartel and the Lions Gang. His involvement in the criminal underworld spanned years, with allegations of drug trafficking and money laundering dogging his every step. But perhaps the most notorious figures to emerge from Glasgow's criminal underworld were the Gillespie twins. Wanted for their involvement in drug trafficking on an international scale, the twins were the subject of a relentless manhunt that spanned continents. Their crimes were as audacious as they were brutal, with connections to some of the largest drug seizures in Europe. From their base in South America, they orchestrated a vast smuggling operation, flooding the streets of Glasgow with illicit substances and leaving a trail of destruction in their wake. But as law enforcement agencies closed in, the twins vanished into the shadows, their fate uncertain. With the weight of justice bearing down upon them, they became the focus of an international manhunt, pursued by authorities determined to bring them to justice for their crimes. But as law enforcement came into action, another silent killer stalked Glasgow's alleyways and tenements: drug addiction. With each passing day, the toll of drug-related deaths in Scotland rose, painting a grim portrait of the human cost of the drug war. Gangs were no longer the only danger in the city. The rise in drug-related deaths was staggering, with statistics revealing a harrowing truth. In Scotland, 3 people died from a drug overdose every day. These weren't just numbers on a page, they were lives cut short, families torn apart, and communities left reeling in grief. It wasn't just the violence of the streets that claimed lives, it was the insidious grip of addiction, fueled by a relentless supply of deadly drugs. As the Lion Gang's influence waned and their grip on the drug trade loosened following the police's pursuit, consumers found themselves at the mercy of dangerous substances cut with toxic additives. The impact was devastating, as users fell victim to overdose and tainted drugs, their lives snuffed out in moments of desperation and despair. With each death, the Lions Gang's influence waned further, their once mighty empire crumbling under the weight of addiction and death. But even as the supply chain faltered and the streets grew quieter, the potential for further violence loomed large. With the disruption of the drug trade came a power vacuum, one that threatened to plunge Glasgow back into the depths of chaos and bloodshed. But then came the eventual downfall. The once mighty empires of the Lions Gang and the Daniels clan lay in ruins, their leaders dead or imprisoned, their power shattered by the relentless pursuit of justice. In a series of coordinated strikes, law enforcement agencies moved swiftly to dismantle the criminal networks that had terrorized Glasgow for years. Key figures within both gangs fell like dominoes, their reign of terror brought to a crushing halt by the long arm of the law. Among the casualties was Stephen Bozo Daniel, the feared leader of the Daniels clan. His savage attack on the freeway exit left him scarred and broken, a mere shadow of his former self. Despite surviving the onslaught, Bozo found himself behind bars, facing a 10-year prison sentence for his crimes. But Bozo was not alone in his downfall. His trusted lieutenants and enforcers, once feared and respected on the streets of Glasgow, now languished in prison cells, their days of violence and brutality brought to an abrupt end by the forces of law and order. The Lions Gang fared no better, their once untouchable leaders now facing the full weight of justice. With the arrest of key members and the disruption of their drug supply chain, their grip on Glasgow's streets weakened, their influence fading into obscurity. But despite the victories won by law enforcement, the fight against organised crime was far from over. As Detective Inspector Liam Wilson of the Glasgow Police put it, "We've made significant progress in dismantling these criminal networks. But we are not complacent. We will continue to pursue those responsible for perpetuating violence and misery in our communities until every last one of them is brought to justice." What are your thoughts on this? Do you think Glasgow will be able to heal from all the violence, or is the city long lost? Let us know in the comments below. If you like our content, don't forget to check out our channel. We've got many more stories from the underworld to share with you. See you in the next one.